any older folks here? Sing the chorus. Education, education, this is the foundation. Our rising population needs sound education to be recognized anywhere you go. You gotta have your certificate to show to enjoy any kind of happiness. Knowledge is the key to success. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you will get ready. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. Hit it. La, 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 la. Oh, oh, oh. Ba, 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 da, da, da. Ba, ba, da, 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 da. For employment, yes, employment, you must be intelligent. It's essential, very essential, to have your credential. Remember, if you're block-headed like a mule, no one will employ a fool. You will be the last one to be hired, and the very first one to be fired. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you gon' catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead, 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 dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't follow idle companions, or we will get burned. To earn, you gotta learn. You gotta learn. Whoa, yeah, Illiteracy is man's greatest enemy. So it's your duty, yes, your duty, stamp it out completely. Ignorance always impedes progress. Education saves you much distress. Learn as much as you can. This nation's future is in your hand. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you're gonna catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. I mean dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. It's a treasure, yes, a treasure beyond any measure. So secure it, just secure it. Don't ever ignore it. I said to find life's battles come what may. Education will light up your way. Without it, you'll never, never, never get through. Success or failure now is up to you. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, let them run in life, you gon' get real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. Yeah, yeah. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Though I don't like the companions, they lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today.
Oh, yes, the master himself, the master himself, the master himself, Slinger Francisco, the mighty sparrow. Janet, you my drift self. That's the reason we play today. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, all of you who have come out to be with us tonight and to continue this struggle. Whether you are on the east bank of Demerara, Brother Vibert White from Grove. Brother Vibert is a traveler. He's here religiously. Good evening to you, my brother. Hoping to see you in a couple of weeks. We didn't get to catch up as much in recent times. So you owe me. But I know you always saying, Dr. Hines, let's take one. Let's take two. Good brother. Good evening, Ian. Good evening, Sister Denise. I hope you are back 100%. I know even if it's not 100%, you're out there fighting. I hope you're back 100%. Cherry, Jeffrey, good evening to you, to all of you joining us from Guyana. It's a Friday evening, it's a Friday night. In the old days, Friday night was the night. Friday night was the night when you see, payday, whether you're a sugar worker or a construction worker, it's payday. And Friday night was always the night of the poor. We get to come out on that night and hang out a little bit late than usual. But it's all changed up now. But Friday night is still the night. Good evening. Those of you who are joining us from outside of Guyana, from the diaspora, welcome. We're going to have friends tonight. As usual on the Friday night, it's the night for Dr. Vincent Adams. I tell you what, we started off there with Sparrow, the mighty Sparrow singing Education. And let me tell you something. If it's one thing I learned so much from a UC Guyana. But one of the things that I learned, and all of us who grew up with him, under him, around him, the struggle is not a one-dimensional struggle. And he always made education. Whatever we did, we had to teach. We had to teach. All of us, Kedaki, Dion Abrams, myself, some of them who were not known, we did politics, but we had to teach. Whatever Guyana was doing, he would leave Georgetown, come home to Buxton, teach, and then go back to town. Education. And I want to stress that this struggle we are fighting is not a struggle with boots on the ground alone. We want brains. Send those little children to school. Now, the education system and what the government is doing with it, because they are uneducated, according to Yonet, is the other matter. But I'm saying to you all, send those children to school. We're on to a new era, a new tomorrow. That's what we're fighting for. We're not fighting the PPP just to get them out of power. We're fighting for a new tomorrow where our children don't have to run and run and run in the jungles and on the streets. Send those children to school to prepare them for this new paradise that we are fighting for. We don't want the freedom to come, the paradise to come, and our children are not ready. Send those children to school. Education. You all know what education has done for all of us. All of us. Whether we are civil servants or we're nurses or mechanics or we're in the army or sugar workers, we know what education has done for us. And I can tell you, one of the things that the PPP is running scared about is that in this struggle for a free Guyana, on the opposition side, we have a lot of us who, because of opportunities, went a little bit further than others, and we were able to bring back what we have learned to the struggle. It scares the hell out of them. They don't want to see Dr. Vincent Adams and Dr. David Hines talking to each other, because you know what? Whatever you say about Guyanese people across race, they have a healthy respect for education. And when they see their quote-unquote doctors in the valley, in the mud, fighting up with them, it gives them great joy. That when we come on a Friday night to speak about our common problems, Dr. Vince Adams, he's an accomplished engineer. He could be at some fancy club with his big shot, educated friends, drinking the best whiskey and all of that. But no, he's here tonight to ground with us, to ground with his brothers and his sisters. And as he always says, he's still a Christianburg boy from Wismar. That is what is beating the hell out of them. Because our struggle is not a perfect struggle. But our part of our elites, and by elite, all we mean people who get more of a particular value than others, in this case, education, some of us by sheer luck. If you go back to where Vince Adams came from in Christianburg, where David Hines came from in Buxton, Bottom Station, Line Top, where Aubrey Norton comes from in Christianburg there, if you go back to where we came from, Amanza Walton go to Quarantine, where she came from. If you go back to where we came from, everything says about those conditions that we should not be where we are today. And the fact that we are here today is not because of some great geniuses of ours, because I know many people who were 10 times more bright than me when I was going to school. And they don't have doctorate and all of that. I ran into one of my classmates the other day in Guyana. I hadn't seen her for 40 odd years. A cricketer come to Guyana, see her and married her and carry her away to England. A man named Lonsdale Skinner used to be a wicketkeeper. He challenged Paidana during the 70s. And he married my schoolmate and carried she away. And I hadn't seen her for 40 odd years. I ran into her the other day in Buxton. Bright. Her name is Jean McPherson. You know what? That girl qualified common entrance. She missed it by 1 point. And her father, we call him in the village Culibrong. He was a Douglas, just like Vince Adams. Culibrong makes you go back. In those days, you had 2 chances. He said, you gonna pass. He was a mere butcher. And he sent her back. And you know she passed. Bright. Jean was bright. She gave me my lasting nickname. Those of you from Buxton know it. We were in 3rd standard and we learned the word graft. And then we were learning these nursery rhymes, twisty and twirly were 2 screws. And she was so bright that in 3rd standard, she knew what graft was and how to use it. She graphed twisty and twirly, the first part of those 2 words. And that's my false name to this day. Very bright. She didn't go on to get a doctorate and all those kinds of things. And so many people forget her, but she's one of the brightest persons I have known from the time we were children. In case you're listening, because Jean tells me that her husband, Mr. Skinner, sometimes tries to pull ranks because he's a loyal politics 101 listener. And she said she would tell him, no, I know he. When he was a little boy. I am making that point to say that education matters. And I don't have to tell you all that. You all know that. So we are not just an example for politics. We want to be an example to you all for education. So many parents in Buxton, I'm so humbled sometimes, that bring their little children to meet me. I'm not accustomed to them things. This a big celebrity story and so on. When I land in Buxton, I landed to hang out with my partners, them and things. But so many parents bring their children and their grandchildren to meet me. And not to meet a celebrity as they try to explain. It's to meet someone who they knew they went to school with and who the children now know on TV. But they want them to know that this person is a real person who grew up running around on these streets here in Buxton. We still, as a community, we still respect education. You know, those Buxtonians, they call me all kind of name, you know. But if a non-villager come in the village and don't address me properly, they push their chest out and said, Dr. Hines, please. They don't play with that at all. No, they don't Dr. Hines me, you know. But it's an instinct. So tonight we want to dedicate our program to education. Education. Whatever is happening, educate your children. Send them. Let them go to school. You never know where it will take you. We come tonight and the war is raging. The Israelis are preparing for their ground assault on the people of the Gaza. They have told 1.2 million people, get out of the way. And those people have nowhere to go, which means that once the ground assault starts, they will become collateral damage. It's a war on people. Professor Thomas said it last night. I said it before. It's a war on people. I wish it could have been a war on Hamas and the military in Israel, but no. It's a war against defenseless people. The Palestinian people, dispossessed, disenfranchised, and dishonored, live like flies in an open prison. As I said, the loss of life on both sides, the horror, the rape that you see from both sides. But the problem did not begin last weekend when Hamas bombed Israel. And that's where they, including some of us, have begun the problem. No, the problem goes further back. You do not put human beings to live in the horror that the people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank have to live, and expect them to say, thank you, God, for allowing us to live in squalor. That's not how the human spirit operates. And I draw attention to Guyana. Don't let us get to that point. Ours is an ethnic problem too. Don't let us get to that point. The horror of Mocha Arcadia, the horror of Hillfoot, the horror at Golden Grove, the horror at Dartmouth, the horror every day of this teacher who earns just over $100,000, 500 US dollars. That teacher takes home, a trained teacher. The horror of that. We are Gaza too. African Guyanese and poor people of all races, we are Gaza too. And if you Gaza people, after a time, they will find a way out of Gaza. We are saying to the government of Guyana, we don't want what's happening in the Middle East. We don't want it. And that is why every time, every day, we are drawing attention. And when you think that our Guyana could have been home to Israel and Guyana, you shudder to think that what's happening in the Middle East could have been happening right now. The Gaza Strip could have been the coastal strip of Guyana where we live. Let's talk tonight. Let's talk tonight. Good evening, Michelle. Yonette, God bless you. God bless you. I let the Calypsonian singer speak for me and speak for us because they are wise. Wisdom flows from them. Often it takes them four verse and a chorus to say what Vince Adams and I will take 2-3 hours. Good evening, Rhonda. Good evening, Patricia. Good evening, June Daniels. Good evening to all of you. And I have to say, I love you all. And at least in our Guyana, we can say, we love you. We love you, ladies, without being charged with sexual harassment. Because when we talk about love, We're not talking about romance. We're talking about something that comes from deep within our Caribbean belly, to quote David Rudder. And that's the love that we're talking about. A love that was forged in struggle. Struggle against hate. We are what we are. And that's the way it's going to be. Good evening, Dr. Vincent Adams, the man from Christianburg, Wismar. That was before it was Linden. You had Wismar and Mackenzie, and you are from Christianburg. You never allow us to forget that. As you look at Gaza and what's happening there, and you think about your own cramped existence in those hills there in Christianburg, what goes through your mind as you look at what's happening there in the Middle East?
Good night, Dr. Hines. I'm sitting here and I could just listen to you all night long. You always touch my get to my soul with your conversation there. But welcome to our great listeners. What goes through my mind, and we obviously, I like to say the alleys of Christianburg, which is a big distinction. The alleys of Christianburg. So it's not only alleys, but it's hills and valleys too. There's a place called the Valley, in that area, which is one of the the alleys, just like the alleys people regard it as the big slum area. But it really it has gotten to a point now when I look what's happening in the Middle East, I can't even look at the television anymore. Yes. with the news. I mean, my wife, and we were sitting there even up to this morning, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I had just had to get up and leave. How could people's heart be so? I mean, the politics is one thing. We've got politicians all over the world, but human beings are human beings. That's what our love for human being, that human soul, should come first before anything. It should be first and foremost in our decisions, regardless of what decision we make. And obviously, that's one of the things that is happening even in Guyana. There's no consideration for for human beings and our values and our needs anymore. It's the same thing that is playing out in the Middle East. People, the human beings should, their needs and their suffering should be first and foremost in any decision or any action that we're taking. It's a sad state of affair, Dr. Hines, and it's very sad. It's very, very sad. It's so. I mean, it's so frustrating when you're helpless.
Yes.
You can't do anything. We can sit here and talk and cry and moan, and you still see thousands of our brothers and sisters, people, especially when you can relate to people who come from where they come from. You remember yourself. You have no power, even though in any good democracy, and we call a lot of times we even call Guyana democracy, which the power should lie in the hands of the people. That doesn't happen. You sit there and, with the people who arrogate themselves to this monopoly of power, and you just got to abide with what they're saying. You could fight and of course, you never stop the struggle. But it's so frustrating in that journey, Dr. Hines, and hopefully one day, this may all be over. We all pray for it to be over in the Middle East, where it wouldn't happen anymore, with some kind of a long-term arrangement that involves everybody's interest. And so that's where I see it, dear Dr. Hines. But it's a sad day.
And you read my mouth, because I was just about to say, you're helpless. We're helpless. But we are not helpless when it comes to our Guyana. At least we have some reach when it comes to our Guyana, smaller society. We are from there. Um, wherever we go, we are there, and we can do something, and we are doing something about Guyana. I dedicate the program to education tonight,
Yeah.
in solidarity with our teachers, but in solidarity with the poor. And I give the example of where you and I came from. If anybody
Yep.
came to school and said in 2023, you are a top engineer, and I, a scholar, would professor, would be sitting down and talking not about how wonderful and bright we are, but about how we can make our country better. And that,
Absolutely.
and so I just want you to speak to education as an important component of social mobility, but an important component of the freedom struggle, the relationship between education and political struggle and freedom.
Sure, sure, Dr. Hyde. And again, education is everything to me. You and I, and many others like ourselves, could relate to the value of education. And it's not only about not even money and getting a good job. It's what it does to yourself, your inner soul, the confidence that it embeds in you. The you're not intimidated by anyone. You can go there and speak to anyone without being intimidated. And education. My mother, for example, so you can see the contrast. My mother couldn't read or write, and I can, like I said, growing up in the alleys of Christian Morgan, and I think on your show I talked about, Hector Paris, who you know very
Yes.
well,
Yes.
who benched me in front of the whole class, in front of the whole school, for bringing third place when I was only 11 years old, bring third place in class. But I thought, might have felt it was cruelty at that time, but he whipped me for bringing third place in that class. So he made certain that I would never bring third place again. Well, I brought it after. You could never be the best in your class, but at least you strive to bring first. So that competitiveness. And let me, just to show you some symbols. If you look behind me, there's this guy,
Yeah.
my greatest inspiration, Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
He said, one of his most famous quote, education is the great equalizer.
Yeah.
Education is the great equalizer. And this is, I'm glad you touched on this theme. The next picture, this is where I was taking the oath of office, I was swearing in at the highest level of the United States government, the civilians equivalent to the generals that run the United States government. And at the top there, I don't know if you're seeing a red.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's the President's Award for 2012 for contributing the most to education in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
I had the platform because I was the executive that ran our operations for the nuclear weapons complex in the state of Ohio. So because of that platform, I went into the inner cities and I used the resources that we had. And that's how I got that award, because of my background and where I came from and understood the value of education. That was why I was involved for close to 2 decades. I ran the Linen Fund USA that came home to Guyana every year, medical missions and education mission, to conduct workshops to make sure that our people are educated. The other thing in terms of tying to politics, Dr. Hines, I think you touched on it, in terms of our masters, going back in our history. The worst thing for our masters, even going back to slavery, is for them to see that the slaves are trying to learn or to try to read and write. In the United States, even in this history, to even get the voting rights, they give all kinds of tests to make sure that we couldn't pass it. Forefathers couldn't pass so that we couldn't vote. But it was all about the education. If you shut off education, you rule. And that's the one thing that everybody fear, all of our oppressors fear. and so I'm glad. I mean, you touch my soul. But then on top of that, Dr. Hines, and it's not only even the United States. I grew up here where we, even at our level, I remember when we had the big world economic crisis in 2008, we had to go to MIT and we had a special program every 6 months. We spent 1 or 2 weeks with all the big executives and the Exxons of the world. We hang out to them. We had programs to see how to keep America competitive. And you know what we came up with in terms of the most important attributes that you must have, the most important elements you must have. Number one, you know what was number one? Without this is when we discuss with these big executives as to what make their companies come and invest in foreign company and in foreign lands, foreign countries. The number one thing, Dr. Hines, was education, a good education system. You know what was number two? Follow the rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only about crime. The logic, I think we all understand why education is number one. You've got a reliable workforce, an educated workforce, and and I don't know how many educated people you see commit crimes. Not a whole lot. The number two is follow the rule of law, and it's not about not committing crimes alone. If you're following the rule of law, that means you're disciplined. And when you come to work, you're going to want to have follow procedures and follow the rules on your job. And then, of course, it's number three, that is infrastructure. But this government that we have in Guyana, they've got it upside down. It's even worse than upside down, because they believe that just building these big projects without even planning. There's nothing wrong with having projects without any planning by the seat of your pants, and then only one section of the population, one group of the population that are benefiting. Here's another excellent example, which we learned, the information that we got in this executive programs and training. We had predicted, because we have these exercises all the time, in the 80s, that the next superpower, because we in the United States, I'm talking about, we were always looking to who's going to be our next competitor. When we were looking as to who was going to become the next superpower in the world in the 80s, it was not China, it was India. And you know why? Because the old textbook, tell you infrastructure is the most important. You build it, they come. When we peel back the onion, we said, but when we looked at India and China, India had 10 times the infrastructure that China had. So we predicted it was going to be India. And when China became the next superpower that was challenging the United States, when we looked at it, it was because of the China education system. It was because when we look at the illiteracy rate in India, it was 39%. 39%, even though they've got probably one of the best tertiary education system in India, in the India Institute of Technology compared to MIT. When we looked at China was 9% illiteracy rate, 9%. And then, of course, the type of education, etc. So this topic here is near and dear to my heart, and it's the future not only of us individuals, but of in terms of development in our country, and in terms of developing, the entire planet. And like I said, it's not only for individuals in Guyana, but superpowers such as the United States. That's what we focus on. In my performance, at every year as executives, we get bonuses and that type of stuff, but we have performance criteria. And right up there in my performance criteria and the others was, what are you contributing to society? And education is right up there, because that's what lays the foundation for development of your country. So this here is not just a catchphrase. It sounds good, Dr. Hines. It has substance. It has substance. So I guess what you do, I would like to do, is to appeal to our people But you know, the frustrating thing though, Dr. Hine, it's the visionless government that we currently have. Imagine, I'm going to give you an example. So when I went to Guyana and was heading the EPA, this is exactly where I was leading the EPA. I set up a training program, like, you know, that was already approved, that said that we're going to sponsor employees at the Environmental Protection Agency to go and study anything related to the EPA, and you come back and do a 5-year stint. We're going to sponsor you. I mean, you couldn't beat that, because to begin with, we had no capacity. Do you know what they did when I left? Well, I encourage everybody to start applying to universities now. And this was going to be building capacity, building human resources that we were so severely lacking. You would think that that's the best thing that could have happened. Everybody were getting excited. We were getting applications into the EPA, which reversed the trend that we had when people were just leaving the EPA. People wanted to come to the EPA. They all were applying now. They got admitted. When I left, when the admission letters started coming in, when they went and approached the guy in charge, you know what he told them? He said that I was doing something that was illegal, which is absolute nonsense. And on top of that, listen to this. Listen to the narrow-mindedness, that I wanted to turn the EPA into a university. I mean, so that's the mindset, you know, that we have. But you know, we've got to change that. The rest, Guyana is going to be going backwards instead of moving forward, because these guys, we see what's going on with the teachers right now, which is what you alluded to. There's no respect for teachers. We've been losing teachers. Like I said, I mentioned Hector Paris. Had it not been for Hector Paris and those good teachers, your teachers, you mentioned a few, we and many others besides ourselves could not have been where we are. And it's not about ourselves too. It's to put us in a position, Dr. Hines, to contribute to the building of our nation.
To the building of our nation, Dr. Vince Adams. Dr. Vince, you remember Lonsdale Skinner? He would have come.
I was smiling. As a matter of fact, he was in my time. Lansdale was coming home. He used to play a league, and then he would come home for the trial games and then go back to England. I remember Lansdale very well. A good wicketkeeper, good batsman, and you're right, he was competing with Paidan at the time.
Yes. I think he played 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah.
But eventually, Paidan was too good. I still regard Paidan as the best gloves man. That we have. Well, Lonsdale got married to, the brightest girl of my generation in Buxton. Bright. She could have done anything.
Was she brighter than you? She must be a genius if she was brighter than you, that time.
Yeah. As I said, her father had so much confidence that she missed passing common entrance by 1 point, and he said she go back and write it. And she go back and write it and pass. I mean, she was just a genius. And I say that because people may look at people like you and I and think that we were just
fell from the air, from the sky.
Yeah. No. There were others, because especially the women who had to start raising families and so on. Some of the men, I remember Michael Licorice. I can call that name. He had to leave school at 2nd standard because his father died. And he had to go walk in the back down. Bright chap.
Yes.
You know? So I just want to say to us, keep on that education thing. When the Christians say, when all else fails, that is your God. That is your God on
absolutely
education.
The great equalizer.
Yes.
And I cannot leave without mentioning, because this is something that even going back to the last election that I was driving, that we must have free education, must be reinstated, Dr. Hines. Free education from kindergarten right through university.
Yeah.
That was this administration who removed it. The great Forrest Burnham had that vision. I could not have afforded to go to university had it not been for that free education opportunity, Dr. And many of those, as a matter of fact, many of those who's in this current administration and in both parties, many of those got their education because of this government giving them that free education. And for this government to go and reverse it, you know how many people at the UG, and that was one of the things that the Linden Fund used to be helping out, cannot even go to university because they cannot afford it. They cannot afford it. It's not that they don't have the brains for it, but they don't have the means. Like my motto used to always be when I was heading of the Linden Fund, no child or no person should be denied an education because of lack of means. None. To me, it's a sin to deny anyone the right to an education because of lack of means. And that's the one thing, if nothing else, that has to be reinstated in Guyana's governance.
And good evening to all of you who are joining us tonight. We are talking about education. We're talking about education and struggle. Good evening to Jean McPherson Skinner, if you are tonight. Good evening to you, Mr. Lonsdale Skinner, if you all are joining us from England. And good evening to all of you out there in England, United Kingdom, Great Britain, whatever you all call it. It's the same all three, as we would say in Guyana. Good evening to you. And talking about geniuses of my time, I like to say good evening to Mr. Brian Moses, another mathematical genius of my time. That boy, even as a little boy, could do anything with mathematics in those days. And he's out there in Canada. And good evening to Mr. John Cromwell, who is also a regular listener. Vince, the boy John Cromwell, when we were little to standard force, when the boy opened me mouth, you would see the word Lancer coming up. And he was just a little boy, you know. The rest of us would be, yes, brother, you see, yes, brother, you see. John, as a little teenager, would be asking brother, you see questions. You know, I mean, there were, and that's why I keep saying that we have laid a platform for the future of this country, in that we have brought Guyana to where it is now because we invested in education. And so for the generation that is coming, we have to make a bigger investment in education, because we're going to create a couple of business people and they're going to get rich. But it would be a few. What we want is the community to be rich.
Yep.
And the richness of a community begins with the mind, the brains, the education. So send them children to school, send them picnic to school.
Sadly, Dr. Hines, sadly, you know, the only education that apparently is being taught in Guyana right now as being set as an example is how to make quick money, regardless of how you make it. And you know, because and those few that people, I guess, you know, the young kids, when they look at that, those few making money, and then they go off and they forget the fundamentals of what an education means. You know, everybody, you know, they want to join the right party. You know, if Critic is going to get a contract, for example, suddenly today, you know, you can't buy a cup of coffee, and then suddenly tomorrow you become a millionaire and a billionaire. Why not go down that path? So that's what we're seeing. That's what the future generation is seeing. How could somebody like a Critic jump from one day when he was poor to another day when he's filthy rich? So that's what we're seeing, and that's the only education that is being taught now to our future kids.
Yeah. And that point that you're making there, that's what we have to fight against too, is that they're misleading our young people, our children, to believe that the success in life has to do with putting on a jersey and selling your soul and getting that's what, and what bothers me more than anything else, you're encouraging other people's children to see life in that through that narrow window, but you wouldn't do it for your own children. And that is the selfishness of these leaders that we have to fight against. My brother, we talked the last time about this $214 million that they reduced to $3 million.
Yep.
And we thought the story done there, but apparently it has not. Mr. Jack Joe came back to it in his press conference the other day. What's going on? There must be something larger here than just 214 coming to 3. There must be something beyond the figures that we ordinary mortals are missing. Talk to us.
Well, this guy just can't help himself. And a lot of people say that he's smart, but he's showing that he is not. Because you would think that he would stay silent and let this thing kind of die away. But the guy, he gets it, but he's guilty of something, right? And we all know what he's guilty of. So he had to bring it up in his press conference. He had to, and then he tries to say that either Rutledge, the Exxon chief, is a liar, or all of them people who've been there at the meeting are liars. Because he's saying that Rutledge and all of the guys, Dr. Hans, and you, I'm sure you've spoken to all these folks who were at the meeting, Patterson and Lowe and Norton, and they told me the same exact thing, even without him mentioning, since they came out of the meeting in the conversation when we were even in Washington.
Yes.
They said that Mr. Rutledge said that agreement was done with the government.
Yeah.
To cut it from the 214 to the 3 million. And now he's saying that Mr. Rutledge says that it never happened. That's what he said yesterday. So he's, of course, I believe, all 5 of our people are not going to come out and make public statement at our conference and in private and that is a blatant lie. So I know who to believe. So it's either he or Mr. Rutledge who are lying. I have no doubts about that. But then the other thing, just to give people because I listen to everybody, in terms of understanding how an audit is done. Here's how an audit is done. It's very simple. So even there's no arguments, even the little bit of arguments that he's raised, it doesn't make any sense. Or even what Mr. Rutledge, the excuses that he's making, is absolutely nonsense, and Rutledge knows it. So let me tell you how an audit is conducted. Let's say the government says we're going to do an audit, and it's in the contract. The government does an audit. The government goes out there because if you have the capacity, you can do it yourself. But we don't have the capacity. The government doesn't. And by the way, the United States, we do the same thing. If in a specialized area, if we don't have the capacity and staff, we go out and hire the best company you have, which is exactly what the government of Guyana did. The coalition, by the way, it's the coalition that hired this company. So you go, you hire the company. They come in your first meeting with you call a meeting with the audit team and with Exxon in this specific case. And you say, well, okay, here's the process that we're going to go through. Here are the topics we're going to cover. Okay? And you can do it 2 ways. You put a list of the questions and you hand it to them, and then they assign specific persons to cover each of these topics. Or what they would say is, okay, when you send the questions, we're gonna, you give a coordinator. There's always a coordinator on both sides. So when you send the question, they assign a specialist in each area. They don't want to talk to everybody and have a meeting. It's a waste of time. So everybody go off in their little corners and, back and forth for a few months or how, depending on the audit. And that is when all of the information is exchanged. If the auditor says here, I need document A, that specialist who knows everything about that document A better than anybody, that specialist is supposed to go get that document, the letters, the correspondence. So all of this stuff here. So when the audit is over and that report is written by that audit team, that is the final report. You only call it an audit, and you give the company, such an Exxon, an opportunity to change words or inaccuracies. It's not to say, well, you didn't submit this document You had your opportunity. You can't come now and say, well, I've been, we didn't have time to submit documents. You had all of the time in the world. You can't tell me that you had months to submit a document, and now you're telling me a big company like Exxon, you didn't have the documents ready. But so what the IHS did was exactly the way you write your report, and all you do, you finesse the language. You send it to them. You say, well, okay, let's use a little less harsh language. Say, rather than say that you forged something, say that where it's not, it wasn't, we couldn't find it. So that's the kind of thing that you don't change the numbers anymore. The two, like I said, in each area, the two specialists from both sides, you were communicating every day, and the audit is asking for information, you submit it. So when that report is put together, it's done. It's just editing and doing all this kind of stuff. So when it was submitted now to Exxon, and then of course the government, well, of course, that's when the confusion started. Hearing all these excuses, well, we didn't have time, and then it went from 2014. There should be no negotiations about numbers after that report is submitted. You had your opportunity. So that's how an audit is conducted. So all this hoopla, Exxon could not do that in the United States, Dr. Hines. I'm telling you, they couldn't do that. When we submit a report and tell them this is it, you had your opportunity, it's over. It's overdone. If you want to go to court and say that it was a wrong, so be it. Let's go to court. But we ain't going to change nothing from 2014 to 3, and then you hear all these shenanigans. That's BS. And people ought to judge this government for what it is and for what has happened here.
And for what has happened there. And talking about evidence and data, we saw the evidence of the government bulldozing people's homes in Mocha, in Hillfoot, in Linden, in front of the hospital. And now they're going further with the dishonoring of people. They're not just bulldozing their homes, they're now bulldozing burial grounds.
Yep.
You see, people, you all see? And that is all part of the dishonoring. You all know that Black people and Indian people don't play with the dead. They don't play with the dead at all. You see, you go in Indian areas, you see how they decorate the burial ground and so on. And Black people, they may not decorate it the same way, but they have this elaborate, the wake, the 9-night, the 40 night, the this, the that. You see, we don't play with.
As when we talk about Guyana being a democracy, Guyana is no longer a democracy in the true sense. We know that a democracy, the pillars of democracy are, we've said this over and over. Obviously, the power has to lie in the hands of the people. That's not happening in Guyana. Strong institutions, over and over again, that is not happening. Even with this audit and with the EPA and everything else, with the lawsuit and everything else that is going on, and of course, following the rule of law and human rights, including the right to free expression. And we know the vindictiveness of that people are suffering. Why? So now they've got to compromise themselves. I know of a lot of technical people in Guyana who are compromising, what they do and say because of the fear of intimidation. Tearing down those homes. For example, where is that human rights? Tearing down the homes in Mocha and Linden and Hillfoot and all of it. And now you're absolutely. I could not believe my eyes, Dr. Hines, to see that it's gotten so egregious and barefaced and brazen that they're gonna go tear down the dead. Such something that is so sacred in Region 5. And the nice thing, well, I hate to say this, but what was interesting is that at least the clips that I saw, all of the people who were talking were East Indians. In their own, so it doesn't matter It doesn't matter to them. It's all about money. And my understanding to it is alleged that the guy, and guess what they were doing? They were digging it up to get material for some construction that one of their cronies probably got a contract to build something, and they need a foundation. So they went and decided suddenly showed up with this thing that he owned the land, and it didn't matter. So those are the kinds of things. I mean, how could you talk about running a country and caring for the people, and then talk about one Guyana? One Guyana also means one people. How could you say that? Like I said before, Dr. Hein, the only thing that is being taught to our generations and the generations to come is to make a buck as quick as possible, and it doesn't matter how you make it, as long as you've got the backing. Don't worry, you just be part of us, and you're gonna be taken care of. That's what's happening here. For you to go and do what you're doing to the dead, something that is so sacred. So that's where I see it. But again, these are the kinds of things that frustrates me. I know it frustrates you, because but you know what's going to happen, Dr. Hines, that is even more frustrating? That this here shall be the news of the past again a few days from now, and that should not happen. The people should be held accountable. Right up to the top, not only for the people. These are the kinds of things that where people should be held accountable. And we have a state in Guyana right now. There is no accountability, following the rule of law, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. And that's the sad part. That's the sadness of Guyana.
And moving out of Region 5 back to Region 4, Providence, we notice the story there with the road. And then in comes Edgil, Bishop Edgil. And it is the thing that the things that come out of these chaps' mouths when they get caught. Anyhow, I leave it to you. Talk to us about that road there in Providence and what the minister said.
You know that engineering has been my background internationally. As a matter of fact, I was chairman of the biggest international body of engineering professionals and all kinds of stuff. So, but for him, let's get willy-nilly. Here we've got something happened. We got an uplift. And I could not believe it. I saw it in the news, and I'm wondering what the heck could have happened here. The guy shows up and said he was advised by his engineer that there's some heap. How the hell could you come to a conclusion? Where is the evidence? Where is the technical evidence? That's speculation. I'm not saying that that's not the case. But the first thing as an engineer, a civil engineer would do, well, okay, if you're saying that something is in the subsurface below the ground, you got to go dig, you got to go drill a hole or holes to see, if it actually is from between the heap, what's taking place between that heap and the road. What is the connection? The only way you're going to know what that connection is by drilling holes. How do we know? Because when I look at the video, there are houses all over the place. How do we know now that if they're claiming that it's this heap, then if that's the case, how do we know that it's not going to impact those homes and everything else that is around? But that's the incompetence that we see. Just you know what? There's a pile out there. It must be. That's not how structures or geotechnical structures work, Dr. Hein. Now, I'm not saying that that's not the case, but I, as an engineer, would never go there and say it as if I'm 100% confident. Yes. I could go there and say, well, you know something? You know what? We're believing that this may be the case. However, we're going to run. In the meantime, we're going to conduct emergency, whatever it is, to take care of it. But in the meantime, we're going to be doing the drill analysis and everything to really come up as to what exactly is happening. You cannot know what's below the subsurface unless you go there and do testing. For you to just come, you don't see what happens below the ground, and geotechnical stuff is part of my forte. You always have to go drill. And like I said before, if you were saying that heap is messing up your road, what happened with all them houses that is close by?
Yeah.
Are they gonna? Are they gonna? You know, if you were saying that that's the case, then they should also be worried. Why are they? Why is it not impacting them? We should understand the phenomena. What is there? But you don't just, you know, pull it out of the air and say that that's the issue. So that's what I've got a problem with. It's not. It's just speculation, and you do not. Engineering and science is not about speculation. That's the one thing. As a lawyer, you can go and finesse you know, and spin things. You don't spin engineering and math and science. You don't spin it. One and one always make two. Okay, so you can't spin those. Science is science. There's no spinning of it. And so it was kind of amusing, to be honest, listening, watching him on television.
Yeah. Politician just decide that he knows all, and it's part of the domination instinct that is quite abroad there in the PPP. What do you make about all these questionable contracts? All the, as the Trinidadians will say, all this bacchanal around contracts, from the awarding of contracts to friends and family to people who are given contracts with no expertise. My understanding is that if you want to be a contractor, you can't stop anybody from being a contractor. But when you put in your bid, you have to show, if it has to do with engineering, you have to put in your bid who's the engineer. You have to satisfy the people that you have the requisite skills to do the work, or you don't get the bid. So anybody could be a bidder. But do you have the equipment? Do you have the technicals? Am I wrong?
Absolutely not. And you know, again, when I was at the EPA, NPTAB, you talk about a rigorous entity that you had to go through. You know, I was a federal agency, and even I sometimes used to think that it's an overkill what they used to be doing. But apparently that's not there anymore. It's not there anymore. And the way that you, like, in that I was implementing at the EPA also, which is what, you know, I was used to doing in the United States, to move to disconnect all the politics and biasness. What we had for every single contract, what you would establish is a board, a selection board. And that selection board, Dr. Hines, would be anonymous. Nobody knows who's on that selection board. And anybody who's caught revealing any information to the public or anything as to who's on that board, they could be fired or prosecuted. And on top of that, besides that anonymous selection board, you had what is called an independent estimating committee with highly technical folks. So, for example, if you have a contract for a bridge, you get the best minds you can find within the agency, or if you got to go get a consultant, that's fine too. You put them together, and even before you award that contract, or you do your own independent government estimate. We call it an IGE, independent government estimate, from that group. So they say, well, okay, here's the scope of work. Here it's going to cost $100 million. So we keep that in our back pockets. The bidders doesn't know what they're bidding on. So when they bring in their bid now, then you can compare that. Because what happens is this group, the selection group that is anonymous, they take it in and they rank all of the bidders with cost. Number one, here's the cost, etc., etc. But they don't know what our independent government estimate is. So they would send back that ranking to us with the reasons for the ranking, with the criteria. They've got to look, of course, to the criteria. They send that back to us, and then we compare those numbers and reasons with the independent government estimate. And let's say we say the independent government estimate says $100 million. There might be a contractor who bids $50 million, and if it doesn't meet what the standard that we requested, we throw that out. Or if somebody bids $200 million, it doesn't meet it, we throw it out. And then there's some contractor who may even get innovative and may come up with something that we had not even thought of. And then we take that into consideration now, and then we make a recommendation back to the selection committee. So everything is, it's very compartmentalized. There's no interference. Like I, for example, even I as the government official who's in charge of all this project, I cannot even have conversation unless they call me. I cannot have conversation with that independent government, not with independent, with the selection team. They're totally insulated and isolated in some cases. And nobody knows who they are. You cannot, under no circumstance, reveal who those people are. So that's the way that we did it. And I want to go back to Guyana. In PTAB, it was almost, they operated that way. I think they even went to the extreme where it was so rigorous under, what's the name of the guy who ran it? I can't remember, under the coalition. But anyway, they were, they in principle, but now it's a free for all. I mean, this is all part of exactly where we, everything that we've spoken of before. It's about who, the way we go back to education again, the link to education. Education doesn't matter to the kids. It's corrupt practices. It's taking the shortcut to everything to make a buck. That's what it is. You're not following processes. You're not following the rule of law. All of those type of structures, institutional structures, it has been torn down. And that's what's happening here. That's what's happening
there. Dr. Vincent Adams, I want to thank you again on a Friday night for not for deciding to come on here and to share with us, to ground with us, rather than going with your science buddies to Joe and at the country club and think you're here doing the people's work and giving back to Christianburg and by extension to Guyana and to humanity. Our brimful thanks to you.
Hey, I don't, not that I don't appreciate it or enjoy it, but I'm sure you feel the same way. I enjoy going back to my roots, hanging out to the street corner. Like when I was in Guyana, I mean, them corner shops used to attract me. As a matter of fact, I had a place, Dr. Hines. Anytime I go up the East Coast, I had to stop. There's a shop in front of Buxton. A shop right to the. I used to have to get my cocoa rice.
Oh, you're talking about Iman.
I had to stop and get my cocoa rice and hang out there for a little while drinking my beer. But I had to stop there. that was one of my. But I used to love those type of. I mean, that's where you feel at home when I go to Linden. I go with my friends in the alleys, and we even had a place in Linden we call the Parliament.
Yes, I know the Parliament well.
That's right. That's right.
I know the Parliament well. Yes.
That's
Dennis
right.
Booker, he stopped by you there, by your cousin Iman. Look, let me take it back. Because Iman dead and gone long now, and his wife, Dawn, still run the thing. Dawn, don't cuss me and say, it's Iman business. It's you business, and you cook up that Dr. Adams talking about.
That's right.
So, let me take back Iman. Dawn, I don't want you business. So when they carry my name, I hope they tell you I correct myself and say it's Dawn Shop and Dawn Cook Up.
That's right.
Don, if I don't visit Don Cook Up place, Dr. Adams, and I'm in the country for 3-4 weeks, when Don see me, if she see me at the funeral, she said, Dr. Hines, you flew in just in time for this funeral. What she mean is that today in the country land, and you don't come at me shop. So Don, I beg pardon, is you shop and you cook up, Dr. Adams talking about.
That's right. And I had my very good friend and partner who came from Buxton, and he came to Christianburg and grew up with me, my next door neighbor. Dr. Butts.
Yeah.
So me and Hector, sometimes me and Hector used to some nights we used to leave Georgetown just to go and get that cook up and drink a couple of beers in front of
Hector is a movement man. Used to be at the Ministry of Finance there.
That's right.
I haven't seen him in a couple of years.
Yes, I too. He goes. I guess he goes between. As a matter of fact, I was gonna call him to find out he had bought land at Moko, and he was farming and stuff. So I tried calling him to analyze him, to ask him if the bulldoze he land and bury animals alive and all that kind of stuff. But
if you find him, give him my regard. Quite a chap, man.
Definitely.
Enjoys the party, enjoys the sport, man.
Oh, absolutely. When you go karaoke, he was karaoke king.
Yeah. Oh boy. Dr. Vince Adams, thank you very much. And I'll see you next week. God.
Definitely.
Dear life. Thank you much. And for all of you, thanks very much for staying with us another week, allowing us to come into your homes, your minds, your hearts, and to bring you along with our common struggle. Our struggle is not just for naked politics, but our struggle is for humanity. We go into the weekend as the people of Gaza brace for the onslaught that has been telegraphed. We continue to stand with them as we stand with the people of Israel, the innocent people of Israel who have suffered because of the blunders of their leaders on both sides. We pray, if we must, for the people of the Palestine, because when we pray for them, we are praying for our own people in Guyana. And we are saying our interest in what's happening there in Gaza. Our interest in what's happening in Gaza is not just our solidarity with the people of Gaza, with the Palestinians, and with the unsuspecting, innocent Israelis, but also solidarity with ourselves, our country. The conflict in our country is not far away from what it is in the Middle East, in Gaza, in the Palestine. And we don't want to get there, and that is why we are raising our voices every day, every night, and to say to an uncaring government, stop, we are human beings, stop, do not ghettoize us, do not Gazaize us, do not apartheid us. And every time we raise our voices, they tell us, bring the data. I suppose that's what they're going to tell the people of Gaza. 1.2 million people has to get out of the way. Are we going to ask them, what is the data? The evidence is clear. The evidence is clear. The evidence is clear. So it's going to be a weekend that we must keep watch for the sake of humanity. For the sake of humanity. We are not there at the theater of war. But the theater of war is ever present in our consciousness. As Sister Sandra, singing Sandra said, the war will go on because in the end, nobody wins a war. You do not settle questions of human rights by war. You do not settle questions about people's humanity with war. At the end of the day, we of all the species, we are blessed with faculties. We are blessed with the ability to reason. And it is those faculties that we must bring to bear on our problems. And that is why tonight we talked about education. We talked about education. Because when you throw education through the window and you replace it with greed, then you're going to walk down the road of perpetual war. And war ultimately is not war against tanks and war against bombs. It's war against people. Because people are the victims. I grew up as a little boy with Jimmy Cliff singing a reggae song called Vietnam. And it's etched in my memory. A mother getting a call to say, your son is dead. Jimmy Cliff, Vietnam, ringing in my ears tonight, bombarding my mind, my head. The soldiers, they never start the war. but they're victims. We pray for humanity. We pray for the Palestinians. We pray for the innocent, unsuspecting Israelis. And we pray for our Guyana, that we do not walk that road, that somebody, something will trigger in the minds of those who hold on to power. As we say in Guyana, one day, Congoti. One day, Congoti. Our tomorrow must not be a Gaza tomorrow.